The first thing that really bothers me is the sound of the water. Not the pipes, not the distant wind above the concrete, not the generators I remember from before the world fell apart. It is the slow, irregular splash from below the stairs, the same way you hear someone move in the shallow end of a pool when you are not looking. I keep pausing in the middle of whatever I'm doing, holding the lantern away from my body, and just listening. One drop, a faint ripple, then another sound that does not match any pipe I know. I am sitting on a metal bunk on the upper floor of the bunker, boots off, socks drying on a pipe. My backpack is open on the mattress next to me. Gear spread out in a neat mess I keep rearranging because my hands need something to do. 2 cans of beans, one already empty and rolled flat under my heel. A folding knife, a small first aid kit, 3 batteries, my old phone that does not do anything except act as a flashlight when I baby the power bank. My crowbar leans against the bunk, close enough that my fingers can close around it without looking. I keep glancing at the doorway that leads to the stairwell, where the concrete turns darker and the air smells damp. I found this place just before sunset. The hatch was buried in scrub and rust, set into the slope of a small hill at the edge of a ruined industrial park. If the painted letters ever said anything useful, the rain stripped them away years ago. I did not plan to stop here. I was cutting across the back of the park to avoid a main road that had too many burned cars and too much movement in the distance. The hatch caught my eye because the ground around it was clear of debris, almost swept, and the padlock was new. That should have been a warning. Instead, I told myself that new metal might mean recent supplies. There were 3 infected between me and the hatch when I first saw it. They were scattered in the overgrown lot, wandering without any pattern, bumping into old steel drums and chain link. One turned its head when my boot knocked a rock, and its jaw twitched the way they always do now. I did not wait for the rest to notice me. I moved steadily, not fast enough to trip, crowbar in my hand, backpack tight against my shoulders. I did not say anything, did not make any extra noise. The hatch mattered more than anything else around me. The first infected reached for me, and I stepped past its arm and brought the crowbar down on its temple. It folded and lay still on the cracked asphalt. The other 2 reacted to the sound instead of the sight. That gave me a few seconds. I reached the hatch, tried the handle, and felt it give under my weight. There had been a lock, but someone had cut it with bolt cutters and left the broken metal in the weeds. I swung the hatch up, metal hinges protesting, and a breath of cool, stale air moved up from the dark. It smelled of concrete, dust, and faintly of something metallic. No rot, no smoke, no cooking, no people. That combination felt close enough to safe. I slipped inside, pulled the hatch down above me, and dropped the locking bar into place a second before fingers scraped at the outside. Knuckles hit the metal a few times, dull and uncoordinated. After a minute, the sounds shifted away. The ladder inside was short, just enough to get from the surface down to the upper landing. From there, concrete steps led down to the main corridor, painted cinder block walls and a low ceiling with old fluorescent fixtures that did nothing now. I used my phone's flashlight to sweep the hallway and pick a direction. Left led to a dead end and a storage room stuffed with empty metal shelves and a few busted plastic crates. Right opened into a wider space with 4 doors, and further on, a stairwell that dropped into shadow. That was where the smell of water came from, that heavy, damp odor of standing liquid that has been trapped too long without light. The upper rooms were mostly intact. Someone had lived here before me. I saw it in the way things were left half open and half finished. The first room was a mess hall with bolted tables, a small kitchen, and a propane stove dragged in from somewhere else. 2 empty cylinders sat against the wall. Cupboard doors hung open. Whoever used this place already stripped it to the studs. The second room had folding cots lined up 2 by 2, some still rolled out, blankets crumpled, a mug on the floor with a dead spider at the bottom. The third room looked like an office, a desk, a few binders, a rusted metal cabinet that did not lock anymore. The fourth had tools, which immediately made the entire bunker worth the trouble. Now, hours later, I am in that bunk room with my socks drying and my lantern burning low. The initial rush of relief from finding shelter is gone. It always fades fast. Once the body has a roof and 4 walls, the mind begins to find cracks. I keep staring at the stairwell doorway and listening to the water. That is where the cracks are in this place. Water is movement, and the dead do not move without sound. I thought at first that the bunker had taken damage and groundwater was seeping in. Every old place eventually does. But the pattern is wrong. The first time I checked, the water on the lower level reached the 3rd step. An hour later, it touched the 4th, then the 5th. The rain outside stopped a while ago, but the water below is still climbing. I swing my feet back into my boots, not bothering with the still damp socks, and lace them tight. The concrete is cold through the thin soles. I clip the lantern to my belt, grab the crowbar, and step into the corridor. My steps echo more than I expect, and the sound makes the bunker feel bigger than it is, like the empty spaces are listening. I move toward the stairwell, counting my breaths in my head instead of feeling them. The air grows cooler and wetter as I approach. A faint draft brushes my cheeks and smells faintly of metal and old machinery. The stairwell is a simple concrete shaft with railings on one side, worn smooth in the places where hands used to slide down day after day. The light from my lantern falls down the stairs and reflects off the water, which has climbed higher since the last time I looked. It now reaches halfway up the 7th step. The surface is dark and almost still, with slow ripples that radiate outward from somewhere deeper in the flooded level. Bits of debris float near the edge, a piece of insulation foam, a plastic spoon, a strip of cloth that might have been part of a shirt. There are no bubbles from a leak in the wall, no visible stream from a broken pipe. The water just stands there and grows. I crouch on the dry step above the waterline and lower the lantern closer to the surface. The light does not penetrate very far. The water is cloudy, full of rust and dust and whatever else has been stewing down there. When I lean closer, I hear something through the concrete and liquid. Not quite a knock, not quite a scrape. A dull, irregular impact somewhere far below, carried upward through the stairs. It reminds me of someone pushing a heavy object against a locked door, pausing to reset grip and then pushing again. I pull the lantern back up without thinking about it. My free hand tightens around the crowbar. There is a metal sign bolted to the stairwell wall at shoulder height. The paint is flaking, but I can still read the words. Level -1, medical storage generator. An arrow points down into the flood. Somebody scratched a line through the word medical with a key or a knife, long before the bunker flooded. No other notes, no warnings. Just that silent correction from whoever realized this place was not going to save anyone. I picture beds, equipment, fuel tanks, and something sealed. If the lower level held the generator and storage, that would explain the pipes and cables I saw in the mechanical room upstairs. It would also explain the water if the reservoir or some underground tank ruptured, but it does not explain the pushing sound. I stand up and follow the handrail back up to the corridor. The air feels heavier than before, although I know that is just my head tracking every detail and assigning meaning to it. I decide to check the mechanical room again. If there is any working pump in here, I want to know. Flooded bunkers are ugly places to die. If I can slow the water or buy an extra hour, I will take it. The mechanical room is at the far end of the corridor, past the mess hall. The door sticks halfway, and I have to shoulder it open. Metal grinds against the floor where the frame has sagged. Inside, the room is a maze of pipes, tanks, and old equipment. A big diesel generator sits against the back wall, access panels open, filters removed, a wrench still lying on the grating where someone left it months or years ago. The fuel tank is dry. I know because I checked earlier and got nothing but fumes. The real point of interest now is the sump pit in the corner. A square hole in the floor with a metal grate over it. A pump hangs from the pipes above, thick hose running into the pit. When I first came in, the pit was dry and dusty, useless. Now, when I shine the lantern into it, I see water lapping at the lower edge of the grate. The pump has a manual override lever on the side. It is the old kind meant for basements where power goes out often. Next to it is a breaker panel with a row of switches and a label that says Pump 1 in faded marker. I test the lever with the back of my hand. It moves, stiff but not frozen. That is something. I flick the pump breaker off and on. Nothing happens, which tells me the main power bus is still dead, just like before. Somewhere between the generator and the rest of the system, a line is broken. I crouch next to the pump and study the fittings. The intake line runs down into the sump. The outlet runs behind the wall, probably toward an external drain line. If I can spin the pump manually, maybe I can move some water from the lower level out into the ground outside. I wedge the crowbar through the pump lever to give myself more leverage and start to push it back and forth. The pump resists at first, then yields with a grinding sound. Each stroke is slow and heavy. Water below sloshes, pulling away from the grate and then returning. I keep a steady rhythm, counting each push. After a minute, the water in the sump starts to drop, exposing more of the concrete walls. I pause, listen, then keep going. In my head, I picture water being sucked from the flooded lower level, through some hidden line, and out into the soil beyond the bunker. It is a simple picture and may not match reality, but the important part is the water level going down. The effort burns in my shoulders and arms after a few minutes, but I focus on the motion instead of the strain. Push, pull, listen to the gurgle, watch the water line. I stop only long enough to check the stairwell again. When I get there, the water has dropped by one step. Not much, but visible. The surface looks slightly clearer, ripples spreading more quickly. I do not hear the heavy impacts from below anymore. That should comfort me. Instead, it leaves a blank space in the soundscape that my mind fills with things I cannot see. Silence from the dead is rarely permanent. Back in the mechanical room, I keep working the pump until my arms shake every time I move the lever. I stop before I lose my grip and have the crowbar smash my fingers. When I shine the lantern into the sump, the water level has dropped almost entirely out of sight, held only in a shallow pool at the bottom. That kind of rapid movement means there was a direct channel to a larger volume. I stand, forcing my breathing to settle as quickly as it can, and walk to the stairwell again. The water line has retreated almost 2 full steps now. 8 steps down, dark and still, but with more of the concrete visible. I should feel relieved. Instead, unease sits in the space where relief should be. The water did not fight the pump at all. No air pockets, no gushing from a single broken pipe. It flowed the way it would if a door opened under it and gave it room to move. I tilt my head, listening. Somewhere far below, deeper than before, I hear a new sound. A dragging, irregular scrape, followed by a splash and a wet thud against metal. The pump did not just move water, it moved whatever the water was holding. I stand at the top of the stairs and shine the lantern as far down as it will go. The light reaches a landing where the water ends and the concrete continues, then fades into darkness where the lower level begins. I study the walls, looking for any sign of stress or seepage. Nothing obvious, just wet concrete and the faint sheen of moisture. A thin foam strip runs along the base of the wall, probably part of some old ceiling system. My attention settles on a metal door at the bottom, just visible in the lantern's glow. It is thick, with a wheel handle and multiple locking dogs, the kind of door used to separate zones in a bunker in case of fire or contamination. The water line had reached halfway up that door when the lower level flooded. Now it is exposed again. I should leave the door alone. That is the first clear thought that cuts through everything else. There is no reason for me to go down there right now. I have a dry upper floor, some food, a roof, and a hatch I can still use. Whatever is sealed behind that door is not my problem. The correct move is to rest, eat a little more, and be gone by morning. At least, that is what the calm part of my brain says. The other part keeps replaying the sound of the scraping and the thud, and the moment the pump stopped fighting and pulled water away freely. It also reminds me that if the lower level fills again faster than I can pump it, I could end up trapped up here without knowing why until it is too late. Information is safety. Lack of it is how people end up running in the wrong direction. I decide on a compromise. I will go halfway down, stand on the first dry step above the lower level, and listen. No door opening, no stupid hero moves, just ears and eyes and a bit more data. I step down slowly, counting the steps, lantern steady. Each time my boot touches concrete, a faint hollow echo trails off into the dark. The air cools further and takes on a sour edge, the kind that comes from places that have been wet and closed for too long. The smell of mold mixing with old disinfectant. My skin prickles under my jacket, not from temperature, but from the way my brain reads that smell as a warning. On the last dry step before the landing, I stop. The lower corridor stretches out ahead, lit only by my lantern. Doors line each side, some open, some shut. The metal door at the far end, the one with the wheel handle, stands out immediately. It is not fully closed. The wheel is turned most of the way, but one of the locking dogs sits slightly out of its socket. The gap is too small to see through, but it exists. Rust streaks run down from the hinges, where water soaked and then receded. The floor leading from the door toward the stairs glistens with thin trails, as if something heavy was dragged along it while the water was still in motion. I kill the sound in my own body by swallowing and pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, something I learned when I needed to listen past engine noise years ago. The bunker answers with its own noises. A drip, a faint creak as concrete settles, then a soft, repeated bump from the partially closed door. Not strong enough to move it, just enough to make it tremble. Each bump is followed by a pause and a wet sliding movement. I know that rhythm far too well. Bodies in water do not move the way living people do. I back up 3 steps before I realize I moved. The decision happens below conscious thought. My hand tightens around the crowbar, and my thumb presses so hard against the metal that the skin complains. The smart path is even clearer now. Whatever is behind that door is pressed against it, rising with the water and trying to push into the corridor. The pump lowered the level enough to wedge the body or bodies in a new position, which is why the sound changed. If the door fails, the lower level will not just reflood, it will release everything stored there. I picture infected left in isolation rooms, strapped to beds that later snapped, or bags that were never carried out because no one made it past the outbreak's worst day. The details do not matter. The outcome does. I climb back to the upper floor and close the stairwell door, even though it will not stop water. It is only a wooden fire door, not a bulkhead. Still, the action gives me a boundary. Dry side, wet side. I drop the bolt into place and stand in the corridor, listening. The sounds from below are muted now, but not gone. Every so often, a faint bump runs through the concrete and finds its way up the frame. It reminds me that the lower level is not empty. I glance toward the ladder to the hatch and ask myself the simplest question. Do I stay or do I leave? Outside, the sun would be fully down by now. The infected do not see better in the dark, but they move more when the air cools and human eyes fail. Leaving now would mean climbing out into thick brush and broken asphalt with unknown numbers nearby. Staying means sharing a structure with rising water and sealed infected. I weigh both options against what I know of myself. I am tired from the day's travel and from forcing the pump. My legs feel solid now, but that could change fast if I end up sprinting through ruined streets. Inside here, I have fixed walls, one known stairwell, and one exit. Uncomfortable odds are still better if the map is clear. I decide to stay until dawn and use the time to prepare for the worst case. If the lower door fails and the water rushes in, I want to know sooner rather than later. I move back into the mechanical room and search for anything that can give me a warning. On a shelf above the generator, I find a row of metal rods and 2 old buckets. I carry them to the stairwell, open the door again, and set one bucket on the landing halfway down. I angle the other rod across the steps so that a sudden surge of water will shift it and knock the bucket over. The metal will clang against the concrete, loud enough to carry to the upper floor. It is a simple alarm, but simple often works. Back on the upper level, I drag one of the lighter bunks into the corridor and wedge it under the hatch ladder. If I have to leave in a hurry, I want everything staged. My backpack stays packed near the ladder. I refill my water bottle from the one working tap in the mess hall sink. The water tastes flat, but clean. Some buried tank still has pressure, which raises its own questions, but I let them wait. I check every door on the upper level, making sure hinges move and locks turn. I prop most of them open so I do not waste time fumbling with handles later. Only the stairwell door stays closed. Time stretches in a strange way when you are waiting for something you cannot predict. I sit on the bunk near the ladder, lantern dimmed to conserve fuel, and run through mental checklists: weapons, water, food, exits, obstacles, recent sounds. Outside, wind brushes the hatch every few minutes, a faint, dull thump in its own rhythm. Below, the bunker makes quieter sounds, the occasional drip from pipes, a soft tick from cooling metal in the mechanical room. No more dragging from the lower level for a while. That absence tempts me to relax. Relaxation in a place like this is how you miss the one important change. After what feels like an hour, I stand and decide to check the stairwell again. Waiting without updated information is not my style. I open the door carefully, keeping my weight ready in case something pushes from the other side. Nothing does. The air that washes over me is cooler and thicker. I lean in and listen. The faint bump returns, slow and intermittent. It has changed position. Before, it came from deep behind the lower door. Now, it carries more through the stairs themselves, as if weight shifted closer to the steps. The mental picture becomes clearer. Something is pressed along the corridor floor, slowly moving as water rearranges it. I do not go down this time. I stay at the threshold, watching the edges of the steps in the lantern glow. The line of damp concrete where water used to reach is visible as a darker band. It has not climbed again yet. That means the pump did its job for now. I consider going back to work the lever again, but my arms still feel worn from the last session. There is also a chance that shifting more water would dislodge whatever is braced against the lower door and let it move more freely. Sometimes stability is worse, but sometimes it is the only thing between you and the unknown. I close the stairwell door again and set the lantern on a table in the mess hall, where its light casts long shadows across the bolted seats. To distract my brain and keep myself anchored, I rummage through the office. Earlier, I only did a fast scan for obvious supplies. Now I take my time. The desk drawers hold old pens, a dried-out pack of wipes, a cracked mug with faded writing, and a small bundle of index cards held with a rubber band. The top card has a date from years before the outbreak, and a list of names with check marks next to them. Staff rotations. The next few cards list maintenance tasks. One of them catches my eye. Inspect containment doors, test seals, document anomalies on B3 log. There is no B3 on the walls here, which means there were deeper levels before someone flooded them or sealed them. The idea that I am not even at the bottom of this place leaves a heavy feeling in my stomach. Beneath the flooded level, there might be another section with more doors and more sealed rooms. I flip through the cards until I find one with medical scribbled across the top. Underneath, a short list: observation ward, isolation, decontamination, specimen storage. Someone added a final note at the bottom in different handwriting. Do not enter storage without escort. Use CR masks after Incident 5. The number is circled 3 times. There is no detail about what Incident 5 was. The card does not mention the word infected or outbreak, which might mean it predates the collapse. Or it means the kind of people who write these cards avoid direct terms. Knowing that deeper parts of the bunker exist does not change my immediate options, but it shifts the weight of the place in my mind. This is not a simple fallout shelter thrown together during a panic. It is a layered structure with procedures and incidents. That means someone used it for something serious enough to require containment. That same someone probably ordered the lower levels sealed and flooded when things went wrong. The dead outside are bad enough. The idea of whatever lies underwater here, preserved and buoyed, scratches at the back of my skull. I put the cards back in the drawer. Too much information can paralyze just as easily as too little. Another hour passes. I mark the time by the slow burn of the lantern. The fuel is not unlimited, and I do not know when I will find more. When the flame starts to shrink, I trim the wick and lower the brightness again. That throws more of the bunker into shadow, which my brain fills with shapes until I force myself to ignore them. The fatigue from the day presses against my thoughts. I know I need sleep, even if it is light and broken. Without it, any decision I make at dawn will be worse. I lie down on the bunk nearest the ladder with my boots on, backpack as a pillow, and the crowbar resting along my leg. My ears stay fixed on the sounds of the bunker. I drift somewhere between waking and shallow sleep. Images from the day blur together. The edge of the industrial park, broken signs, the hatch handle cold against my palm, the submerged steps. Every time my mind starts to slide into deeper rest, a sound pulls me back up. Once it is the faint clang of metal from below. Another time it is the hatch shifting slightly overhead as wind moves across the hill. At one point, a sharp clatter jerks my eyes open fully, and I am on my feet with the crowbar raised before memory catches up. That last noise came from the stairwell, my improvised alarm. I cross the corridor in 3 long steps, careful not to rush so much that I stumble. The stairwell door is still closed. Behind it, I hear water. Not a slow drip, a steady, growing rush, the low rumble of liquid trying to equalize. That means the lower door changed state. The bucket and rod setup must have been hit by the first small surge and then by more. I pull the bolt and open the door a few inches, pressing my shoulder against it in case something heavier rides the water. Cold, damp air spills through the gap. It smells of stagnant water and something older. I widen the opening enough to look. The first thing I see is the edge of the landing, already wet. Water pours up from the steps below, not as a violent wave, but as a thick sheet. It slides over each step in turn, spreading and climbing. My bucket alarm lies on its side, rolling slowly back and forth, struck by the advancing water. The sound that woke me is still fading into echoes. The lower door must have finally shifted under the constant pressure and whatever weight leaned against it. Now every gallon from the lower level is trying to occupy the same vertical space as the rest. The rate of rise is not explosive, but it is steady. If I do nothing, the water will slowly climb back up to its previous mark and beyond. Depending on the total volume, it might reach the upper floor. The bunker was not designed as a swimming pool. Electrical systems, doors, and walls will fail in messy ways if the water keeps climbing. Worse, the water is not empty. In the dim glow of my lantern, as the surface reaches higher on the steps, something brushes the edge of the landing. A pale curve. Then fingers. Bloated skin, stretched and gray, knuckles swollen. The hand drifts upward and thumps gently against the stair before sliding off and disappearing under the next rise. My throat goes dry. I know that hand does not belong to anything alive. It moves with the water, not against it. That should make it less dangerous than a walking infected. It is still a problem. Water that carries parts of bodies is not safe water. If it reaches the upper floor, every surface it touches becomes a path for infection. I close the stairwell door slowly and lock it again, sealing the sound in as much as the structure allows. Then I head straight for the mechanical room. There is no choice now. If I want to keep using this place through the night, I have to keep the pump ahead of the water. In the mechanical room, the sump pit has already started to fill again. Water rises through cracks I did not see before. It is not much yet, just enough to cover the bottom of the pit, but it tells me there is a constant feed line from below. I jam the crowbar through the pump lever and start forcing it back and forth. The motion pulls at muscles that never really recovered from last time. I focus on the bearing's rough grind instead of the way my arms protest. The water drops from the grate again, slow but clear. I imagine it as a race between the steps and the pit. If I can move enough volume out through the underground drain, the stairwell will not overflow onto the upper floor. Every few minutes, I stop pumping and check the stairwell. The water rises, then recedes, then rises slower. At one point, the surface rests just below the landing, trembling with the flow. Another swollen hand appears, then a shoulder, then a face turned sideways by the current. The skin is pale and sagging, the eyes half open but empty. The head bumps the step, rotates, and disappears again when the level drops. This cycle repeats with different pieces, none of them fully attached in ways that allow coordinated movement. That suggests the bodies in the lower level broke apart under the previous flood, or whatever incident preceded it. There may still be intact infected down there, if any had buoyant support, but the ones reaching the stair now are debris. The knowledge does not comfort me much. Infections do not care whether they arrive in one piece. I redouble my effort with the pump, settling into a functional rhythm. Work, check, adjust. Sweat runs down my back despite the cool air, and my grip slips twice before I wipe my palms on my pants. After what feels like a long stretch, the water in the stairwell stops trying to climb. It hovers at the same level, occasionally pushed a little higher by surges from below, but always drawn back by the pump. The hand does not appear again for a while. Instead, the surface carries smaller objects. Cloth. A dark strip of something that might have been rubber or plastic. I keep pumping until my shoulders feel close to failure. At some point, I accept that I cannot keep this up all night. The bunker is turning into a balance problem that I am not equipped to solve. I am one person with limited strength, facing an unknown volume of contaminated water and failing infrastructure. Even if I hold it back until dawn, nothing says it will not find another path. Cracks in the walls, old service conduits. Flooding is relentless. I step away from the pump and let the lever settle. The sump fills faster now, gurgling up through the unseen pipe, but the rate is slower than the earlier surge. The door below must have reached a new resting position. That gives me a small window to make a better move. Leaving at night is not ideal, but staying in a structure that wants to share its contents with me is worse. I walk back to the bunk, grab my pack, and check the straps. Everything is where it should be. I add one of the smaller tools, a decent adjustable wrench, because even in flight, tools matter. Before I climb the ladder, I turn once more toward the stairwell. The sounds from below are a little louder now, more constant, but still filtered by concrete and distance. I do not feel any attachment to this place. I used its roof and its walls for one night. That is all. People died here before I ever arrived. I am not going to join them just to squeeze another few hours of indoor rest from the structure. I climb the ladder slowly to avoid rattling it. The hatch overhead is heavy, but the hinges move more easily from this side. I unlatch the bar and push upward, stopping when the gap is just enough to see through. The sky beyond is dark, but the stars are blurred by thin clouds. The air that slips in smells of wet earth and rust. I listen for groans, shuffling, or any of the other sounds I associate with the infected. Nothing close. A distant bark echoes from somewhere in the ruins of the industrial park, followed by silence. No wet drag of feet on pavement. No chewing. I push the hatch farther and slide out onto the hillside, pulling it down behind me with both hands. I wait a few seconds until my eyes adjust to the low light. From up here, the bunker looks even smaller. Just a metal rectangle in the dirt, surrounded by scrub and half-collapsed fences. The city's edge glows faintly on the horizon, a soft smear of light where fires still burn or surviving grids still pulse. I crouch near the hatch and scan the lot. 3 shapes lie near the far fence, unmoving. The infected I avoided earlier? Hard to tell. If they are not moving now, they are either fully dead or distracted. I do not waste time walking over to check. My priority is distance. I adjust my pack, shift the crowbar in my hand, and start down the slope away from the industrial park, keeping to the shadows of trees and bushes. Every so often, I glance back. The hatch is barely visible now, just a darker patch among many. The idea of all that water moving below ground, pushing and draining through buried pipes and cracks, stays with me. Somewhere beneath my feet, tunnels shift from air to liquid and back. Bodies that used to be threats on two legs are now threats carried by currents. The infected on the surface chase sound and movement. The ones under there drift, preserved in cold storage until something cracks and releases them. It occurs to me that this will not be the last time someone stumbles over that hatch, tempted by the promise of a hidden shelter. I think briefly about ways to mark the place as dangerous. A skull and crossbones on the hatch, a note scratched into the metal. But the world is full of warnings that people ignore when they get desperate enough. Any mark I leave could also attract someone who reads danger as opportunity. Weapons, samples, supplies. I am not responsible for every stranger's choices. I am only responsible for my own. So I keep walking, letting the darkness swallow the hatch behind me. The sound of the wind through the scrub takes over from the bunker's internal noise. Every snapped twig under my boots makes me pause and listen. The night is not quiet, but its sounds are honest. The road beyond the industrial park is cracked but mostly clear. A few wrecked cars lie nose down in ditches, their glass gone, interiors full of leaves. I move along the shoulder, keeping my profile broken by the occasional tree. When I pass under an old streetlight, I glance up out of habit, even though I know no bulbs glow anymore. Above everything, the clouds thin and reveal a few sharp stars. The world feels bigger here than it did under concrete. Bigger, but not kinder. I adjust the straps on my pack again and pick a direction that leads away from the city's faint glow. Bunkers, in the end, are only as secure as the choices that built them. Today reminded me that I trust my own legs and judgment more than walls someone else designed. As I walk, I replay the layout of the bunker in my head. Upper floor, 4 main rooms, 1 mechanical bay, 1 stairwell, 1 hatch. Lower floor, at least 1 corridor, multiple doors, and a heavy bulkhead that failed under pressure and time. Below that, unknown depth, unknown rooms, unknown incidents. The memory is not about regret. It is a map, information I can use in the future when I judge other shelters. Rising water with no clear source, old medical labels, modified doors. Those are signs I will not ignore next time. This is how survival works now. Not by hiding in the first place that offers a roof, but by reading every detail and deciding how much risk you are willing to carry inside with you. A distant cry drifts down the road, thin and confused. It might be an animal. It might be a person losing a struggle somewhere I cannot see. Years ago, that sound would have sent me running toward it. These days, it just makes my steps a little quicker in the opposite direction. I do not speed up enough to trip. I do not slow down enough to give anything time to close the distance. Steady, measured movement is what carried me this far. My body wants sleep, my eyes burn, and my arms still remember the pump's weight. But each step lands where I choose. The bunker fades into just another entry in the list of places I stayed and left. The real constant is the road and the decisions I make on it. By the time the sky begins to pale in the east, the industrial park is long behind me. A line of trees marks the edge of some old neighborhood ahead, roofs barely visible beyond them. I stop for a moment on a small rise and watch the first hint of morning arrive. The light does not bring safety, but it rearranges the threats in ways I understand better. Shadows shorten, details sharpen, and movement is easier to spot. I can choose a new shelter now with more information than I had last night. Something with height, clear sight lines, and fewer unknown depths. I take one last mental look at the flooded bunker, even from this distance. A pocket of concrete and steel in the ground, half full of tainted water and old mistakes, humming and sloshing under the surface. It tried to draw me in with its promise of safety, and I accepted that promise for a few hours. Then it showed me the cost of staying. In a world full of dead streets and broken homes, the temptation to crawl into any hole and pull the cover shut is strong. Today reminded me that sometimes the safer choice is to keep moving in the open, where at least you can see what is coming. I shift my pack, set my grip on the crowbar, and step off the rise toward the trees, already searching for the next place that will try to offer shelter and the next set of details that will tell me when to abandon it.